Hey everyone, this video is going to be about how you can turn these cheesy looking walls in manufactured homes that are wallpapered into something that looks really nice, hopefully. But this wallpaper in manufactured homes is kind of different than other kind of wallpaper you would see. I mean, this stuff is like, man, they glue this on these sheets kind of before they put them up, and it wraps around these edges right here. So trying to get this stuff off is would be really hard, so I'm not going to take it off. I mean, some of the pieces that ripped off down here at the bottom, down here, when I started trying to rip off little pieces, I mean, you can just see the paper on the back of these, so I mean, it's really going to tear off the paper really bad. If I do that, then it'll turn into this huge job, and so I don't want to tear off all this wallpaper. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do two different things here. These walls in the kitchen, I'm going to try to make look nice with, I'm going to tape some of these seams, these corner seams. I'm going to put a piece of paper tape in there, same with these long seams right here. I'm going to tape those off, and then I'm going to texture everything and paint it. Now in this room right here, it's just my laundry room. So I mean, I don't want to go through all that work of taping stuff and texturing it, because it's just some, like, closet kind of. And so I decided not even to do the floor there. I'm just going to leave the old little linoleum in there. And I put a transition piece right against the floor down here. So I'm going to try to do this as simple as possible. So this room right here, I'm going to come in, I'm going to put some caulk on these trim pieces going up and down, and all these holes you got in the walls here. I mean, I'm going to fix those, and then I'm just going to paint the thing with a couple coats of paint. That's all I'm going to do this thing. Now I'll show you what my my closet in the other room looks like, because I already did that one. So I know that's going to turn out pretty well. So I got kind of funky lighting here, but this closet had a ton of holes all in the back from a million shelves they put in there, and so I fixed all the holes in the wall, caulked these edges, and painted it with 2 coats. And I mean, it turned out like great. I mean, it looks like basically like a brand new closet, So that's what I plan on doing now for the laundry room. The same thing as I did in here, because it looks plenty good for that kind of space. In the rest of the kitchen, you're going to see it all the time. So that's why I want to really kind of fix it with, tape and texture everything. You can see my kitchen is actually pretty huge with all this space in here. So I mean, this is going to be a lot of work. That's why I'm trying to not make it more work than I need. I mean, these cabinets are really outdated. I need to paint those, and then my backsplash, it needs to be redone, but that's too much work for right now. I just want to get these walls looking real nice and get my flooring in, and that should be good enough for me. I'll cut this in right away. This is the before, and this is how it turns out after. So if this stuff was like regular wallpaper, I wouldn't recommend just doing it this way. One time I covered up this big wallpaper mural on a wall, and I used water-based paint, and it bubbled it off in spots, and then I had to cut out all the little bubbles and then fill them in with mud. So it was a big pain. So I think you probably use water to get off regular wallpaper, but like I said, this stuff's glued on there pretty tight. So what I'm going to do in this room, these corners, I'm going to rip off that little trim piece, and I'm going to put a paper tape in there. But these ones up here, I decided I'm just going to leave those trim pieces in. Because the problem is, like, if I took out those trim pieces, it's probably going to be too big of a gap to just put a little bead of caulk in there And then I'd, you know, if it's bigger, then I'd have to use paper tape. And that's a lot of taping to do on these corners. And then when you tape a corner, you're gonna have to put mud coming out onto the ceiling, you know, probably 4 to 6 inches. So it's gonna smooth that out. Then you're gonna have to match all your texture. So I don't want to do all that work. So it would look better if that little strip wasn't in up there, but the amount of work it would cause to fix it is too much. But these long ones right here, I mean, these things are so noticeable in manufactured homes because they put all their joints going all the way up and down, which is not how, you know, drywall you'd have your, you know, stagger the joints. And so anyways, the way they do stuff, it's just really noticeable. So I'm going to fix these with some tape, the ones there, that corner. Once I get over here though, the thing with corners, I mean, these outside corners like this, I mean, it really takes a lot of mud to do an outside corner. And so I really don't want to put a ton of mud on here for one of those corners and then put it, you know, let it dry for 2 days. And then because all that moisture is sitting on this wallpaper, it's probably not good, even though it's so plasticky that, I mean, water probably won't get through it, but I don't know. I'm not going to take chances. And again, that's a lot of work to redo all these corners because, I mean, I got a corner right here, and then I come around the corner. I mean, this thing's a corner. Have 2 corners on this. So if I started doing those outside corners, that's a lot of work. So I'm going to skip that too. And all these trim pieces, though, I'm just going to caulk really well, because as soon as you have like some kind of, you know, gap or something in the trim, then it's just really noticeable. Like up here, there's a, you know, gap with the ceiling, and you can notice that black line, especially when you paint this stuff white. So I'm going to get on fixing all this. Now I got some Kills original paint, which is not water-based, and I'm going to do that for this whole outside. But in this closet, I mean, I already used this Glidden paint from Walmart, and it said, you know, paint and primer, and it seemed to do perfect. So I'm just going to do that in these rooms. I'm not going to use the Kills. I'm just going to use regular paint when I'm done fixing the walls. Hey, so I wanted to talk a minute about fixing all these holes in your walls and the caulking. But this is a closet I have, but it shows, you know, a lot of examples that you can see easily. So somebody fixed these holes before in the wall, and I mean they just put some caulk in there. It looks really sloppy over here too. I mean, all these are pretty noticeable. And if you're going to paint your closet or something with you're just going to paint it, you're not going to texture it, all these are going to be way obvious on a flat wall. So you really want to fix these right. Even if you're texturing this wall, I mean, certain things are going to show up even if you texture it. So like on something like this, where it's kind of hanging, this piece is hanging off, you're going to notice that even if you texture this wall. So you want to fix these things right. You always want them to be innies, not outies. Everything needs to be sticking in. So I'll take a Phillips head screwdriver and really kind of work all these spots in so nothing's sticking out at all. You should be able to kind of run your finger over there and not feel anything sticking out. Now on some of these, like this one right here, you can see the paper kind of move next to my fingernail there. So I know this paper is kind of sticking out a bit, and I want to get that fixed right before I paint this wall. So I'm going to cut that out. So on these kind of spots, I'll just take a knife. You know, don't worry about the hole. It's all going to be filled in. And so I would just cut out that. like so, and you can see something was in the back of it kind of pushing it out there. So now that's all in any. I want to make sure, you know, none of this paper is still, that paper's still soft, so it's still coming up there. So I'm going to cut it out a little wider. Now it's looking a little better. It's still in there, you know, but I'm going to fill all this in with mud. So it's not a problem kind of how much I remove. I just want the walls to be looking sound. So that's a good one. And some of these other ones that are sticking out like this, I'll probably just use something like this to kind of get it all even. That's looking better. But like I said, you don't want anything sticking out. Everything should be innies. And filling this stuff in, I'm just using some regular mud joint compound. I don't use that real lightweight kind of spackling stuff. I mean, that's for filling kind of small holes, and this stuff I'm going to fill in and then I'm going to sand it at the end. So I want it real smooth looking. So that's my that's what I got here for mud. And then on these, you just, you know, of course, just want to put it in there and kind of smooth it out. And over here, we got all these little holes, you know. You're going to need to put 2 coats, basically. So I got 1 coat on those. So basically you let that dry then, and then you're going to need a 2nd coat because it's going to kind of dimple in when it dries. So you're always going to need 2 coats on it, but it goes really fast. You just want to keep it really smooth to the wall. So this is really hard to see, but after this first coat on here, I started to get this little tiny crack right on the edge there, and that's because there's a little soft spot. I can push on it and it goes in, and that's why it left this crack right here. So now I'm going to cut out a little bit more of this, because whenever you get soft spots like that, that's the problem. It'll eventually crack out right there. Alright, and when you're done with your 2nd coat on here, you get you one of these sanding blocks and go over this, you know, just a little bit. You don't need to go over it much, but you want to make sure your edges of your patch are smooth and you don't have any lines kind of on these edges. And there you go. Here's another one, and again, you just want to make sure all those edges of this patch are really smooth and there's no lines that you can see anywhere. Alright, and on caulking stuff, I'm just using this caulk. It's fast dry, so I like things that are fast dry, but I'm going to be using this, and whenever you're cutting your tip on there, you just want to make sure you cut that tip to be really small. You don't want too much of this caulk coming out at one time. But you know, here's what I was talking about with these dark lines on corners. I mean, you can tell this is really obvious with white walls. So I fill in all these cracks right here, and I fill in this side too, just to make it a little more rounded, and it'll paint better, and you'll never see that crack. So whenever I do this, I'm trying to do this left-handed here, so oops, you kind of run a small bead of caulk right down like that, and then when you're done with that, you take your pinky or whatever finger works, and then you just kind of run along the caulk line, and so that'll smooth. If you get too much caulk on your fingers, then you're putting probably too big of a bead on there, but it should just be, you know, big enough to fill in that joint right there. And then I'll come over here on this one too. And fill in that gap. See, it kind of makes it all kind of smoother, rounder looking, and fills in that gap. So that's what you want to do to all your pieces, and I'll do it to the top and bottom of those too. So everywhere basically. So in some spots in this kitchen, there's these wrinkles kind of in this wallpaper stuff. So I am definitely gonna, you know, try to cut all that out so there's not wrinkles, because that's gonna kind of make it hard for the tape to sit on there flush. So I'm gonna go along here and I'm gonna cut out these pieces with 2 hands, of course. And so I'll sit flush, you know, once I get these off of here. Another thing, this piece right here that I'm messing around with, it gives quite a bit. So I'm gonna go get some screws and get this screwed down before I tape that. There is an outlet right here though, so the wire's probably running through here, so I'm not gonna put screws too close to that area. And there we go, just a couple screws. I mean, it's all tight now. So yeah, you don't want kind of loose areas, especially where there's going to be a tape seam. Sweet. So I got my walls all primered, and I got the trim pieces all caulked in, and fixed all my little holes I had. So it's ready to go for trying to tape these seams in the corners here. You know, I did want to say I used this original Kills, which didn't really have a cure time, but when I painted the you know, the laundry room there, the paint said 30 days for a cure time, so that'd be a long time to wait before you put mud and stuff on this. So check that before you use whatever kind of paint. But I did finish this laundry room finally. There wasn't really much room to put my camera anywhere, but I fixed the holes on the walls in here and caulked all these trim pieces, so now it looks really nice in here. And I also put in a new light up there, which looks nice. So there you go. It was pretty easy. It was actually only about probably 60 bucks to make this room look nice. So I mean, that's pretty cheap to make a big difference. But it does look kind of plain now, just solid white, but it looks clean in there, like you would want to wash clothes in there. And so to me, it's like, that's great. So I'm done with one room, so I can close off that baby for now and start focusing on these taping. And for taping these joints up here and the corners, I'm going to be using some taping mud. So in the closet I tried it before, taping with paper tape over this stuff, and it just peeled right off, like it wasn't even sticking. And so before I was using this stuff right here, which is just kind of all-purpose joint compound, and it really wasn't sticking well. And so now I got some of this taping mud, and I'm going to use that for taping on these walls. And it's just kind of, just because these walls, it's like putting paper tape onto plastic almost, you know. So it's not the same as taping on regular drywall. So I think it needs a little extra glue, and so this taping mud should have extra glue in it so it'll stick better. And I also got some just regular glue that I might add to it as like an extra stuff. I'm going to do some practice little seams up there and just see how it turns out first before I do these big long ones. Right on, I'm getting on the taping today. I'm going to mix up some of this. The test ones I did up there, looks like they worked great. So I'm going to stick with adding some glue. So I just took some of this glue and I put it in here. I'm going to mix that with water. I mean, I have no idea what percentage or anything. I don't have a lot in there, but I'm just looking for a little extra stick maybe. But this taping mud should have a lot in it already, so I'm just taking extra precautions. Hey, I did get my glue mixed in some water there. I did watch a video and it says don't just put your glue straight into the mud, it kind of clumps up. So mix it in some water first. Again, I'm just getting a little extra there. When you get your mud, it'll be in like a bag like this. Every time I use some mud, I twist the bag back up and take out the air so it doesn't dry out. But after a while, you'll open up this bag and little dry pieces will fall into your mud. And you just kind of want to avoid those, because when you're doing your final coats of mud, a little piece of dry stuff will make a big scrape in your mud, and then you'll have to pick out your little piece and fix it. So anyways, just be aware of that. And then this stuff is really way too thick as it comes in this box right here to just start taping. So I'm going to need to water down this stuff either way. And so I might as well have my glue water right there. So I'm going to put some of this mud in here. You can tell it's really dry looking. Hey, and I got my mud out here, and if you start taping with this dry stuff, your tape really won't stick in this stuff. It'll start peeling off because it needs to, the paper tape needs to get wet. And so I've seen, here's paper tape right here. You can buy big old rolls of it. I've seen people take that tape and put it in water, and then you mud it in, but I tested that out before and it didn't seem to stick as well. So I don't wet my tape first, but my mud needs to be, watery enough where it's going to wet that tape. Alright, so this is the first seam I'm going to do right here. I just got my paper tape. I usually just get one piece that's, really extra long, probably an extra foot on it or so, and I tear it off. So and I just have this piece of tape. There's a little indentation on this tape for when you fold it for corners. So you don't want that dimpled edge coming out, you want that going in. So again, you got the innies on the outside, so it's going in. You don't want it sticking out. So I'm going to take my mud and I'm going to put a layer of mud all the way down this. And then I'm going to, as I go with the mud, every once in a while I'll make a little mark in the mud with my knife, just so I know where the center of this is. So later on, when I'm putting this on, I'll kind of know where to put the tape. And so once I put it in the mud, I'll squeeze out all the mud up top. You don't want there to be, a lot of times there gets to be a glob right here under this top layer of tape because you don't get your knife all the way up there. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to kind of squeeze out the mud, a lot of the mud. You don't want a lot of mud behind this tape. And so a lot of times too, I use my fingers if these joints aren't very even, and I can feel, soft spots where, there's too much mud, and I can just use my fingers to kind of work that mud out. And then go over it again, and you just want this to be really smooth. So at the end, you don't want these lines of mud out here to exist. You just want to, you know, flatten out everything so it's just this real smooth seam right here. And another thing, if you're going down, putting your tape down here and it gets wonky and you're off track, I would just pick a spot where there's still tape covering the seam, the joint right there, and then take your knife and just tear off the paper there, and then take your next piece, overlap it a little bit onto this piece, and just keep going down. Unless you really want to, you know, rip it all off and just start over. But anyways, you can always, you know, just cut it off halfway and then start a new piece. Hey, and as I was putting this tape on and coming down with my knife, I would make sure I get some mud and put it on the surface too of this tape as I'm going down, so it's got, you know, stuff on the surface and behind it to get it wet. And then I just kind of smooth out these edges. Like I said, you don't want any little things sticking out like that. And just make sure everything's smooth, and probably at the end, you know, right here, I put on about enough mud to be just even with the edge of the tape. I don't have like a lot of mud on it because there'll be another 2 coats on top. Alright, so now I'm going to do this corner right here. You pretty much need one of these corner tools. It would be a pain in the butt trying to do corners without one of these. So first you just take your tape, again tore off a big piece, and you fold it with the, of course, the indentation going in on the outside. I think there's really only one easy way to fold this stuff. But then I come along and I fold this whole piece. So it's pre-folded, so it's gonna fit in that corner nicely. So now it's all folded. So now again, I'm gonna fill this whole corner with a lot of mud. I'm gonna take this piece, I'm gonna stick it into that corner. At the top, I'm gonna work out the mud at the top with my fingers, and I'm gonna hold that piece up there as I just go whoosh and run down. And you'll just have to go over this till you see it gets really nicely fit in that corner. And then once all this tape is nicely fit in there, then I'll just take my knife and go along the edges and clean up the edges. So here's what it looks like with one coat on it. Looks pretty good, and usually with these corners, it's only going to be this coat, putting it in, embedding the tape, and then one more coat over these edges, and it'll be good to go for some sanding. Where some of these butt joints, you know, like the one over here, usually they're not as straight, and those usually, I mean, could take, you know, 4 or 5 coats depending on how, you know, off your wall is. I mean, if it's like, if you set your blade on one of these joints and it like rocks back and forth, like the sticks way out, then it'll take a lot more mud to kind of float it out so it'll look more even. So I finished up the taping yesterday. Boy, it worked out great. So when you're taping, absolutely use the taping mud. I mean, with this much taping, I expected there to be spots where, you know, it didn't stick or something, but I haven't noticed any spots anywhere. So use the taping mud without a doubt. I used that all-purpose mud. in the past when I built my cabin, but I'd always have, stuff not sticking. And so I think that stuff just has so little glue. When you keep watering it down to mud, put in your tape, it just waters it down too much. So use taping mud. I don't even think I needed that glue in there. Really, that first little thing of water I mixed up with glue was all I used to water down my mud the whole time. And so I'm not even sure that was even necessary, but you got to use taping mud. So anyways, I'll try to explain now how to finish this after it's taping. Now, mudding is really an art, so it's kind of hard to explain, but you really want everything to be real gradual, so you don't notice it. You don't want big humps of mud on here on this tape, so you want to always have smooth surfaces. One of the things too is when you're mudding, so this one I used about a 6-inch blade to tape it. I used my corner piece in the corner and then a 6-inch blade to finish it. Now this corner right here, that was the first coat, taping it in. Now I'll just need one more coat. And so I'll do one coat with a 6-inch blade here, and that'll be good. And then I'll just sand the edges at the end. So two is all you need on these corners, and they usually look really nice. Now on all these butt joints, it's kind of hard to cover these up, especially here. They have a 10-foot butt joint, and usually the walls aren't all that straight. So on this one though, you can take your longest knife or blade and put it against the wall there, and this one doesn't rock at all. Usually if you got walls that are pretty crooked, it'll start rocking there. So this wall is very straight, so this is going to be kind of easy to cover up. So after I got it taped there, I would use the next biggest size, which is like an 8-inch. So the thought here is that you really don't want edges ever. You want your edges always to be smooth. And so you cover up this one, so it's bigger than the original, so it'll cover up the first one's edges. And then after that, you use a slightly bigger one, which would cover up this one's edges. And then you use a slightly bigger one that would cover up those edges. So the edges are what's kind of noticeable. And so you don't want ever to have your edges to be seen. So that's why you always cover them up. And at the end, you're going to sand your edges. And you don't want to sand. Sanding is awful. So you do whatever you can to make these things as smooth as possible when you're mudding it, so you don't have to sand. So anyways, this one's going to be kind of easy. I'll just use this one on the second coat, and then I'll probably need a third coat, so I'll use this one. Now that's one that's smooth. Now I'll show you one that's pretty crooked. Okay, and on this one right here, if I put this against it, I mean, there's a really big rock in this, and so I know that, boy, these walls are really off. And so to fix this one, I mean, again, I'm gonna cover this tape again with another layer, but I'm gonna try to start building out this layer, because I'm gonna eventually want this edge to go out, and so it's really rounded out this way. So there's not this, abrupt change right there. So I'm just kind of smoothing this whole thing out, floating out with mud. So this coat right here, so you don't want to keep building up mud on this tape. So you have this bulge here. So this will be kind of the I don't know, what's that, fulcrum or something, but this is the point where I'm going to tilt from. And so on this one, I'm going to come down with some mud, and I'm going to kind of almost lift off this edge so it's not really hard against it like normal, because I want this to be a little high on this point out here. And so I'm going to leave a little bit of mud going down, and then on the next coat, after that dries, I'm going to go from that point where it's sticking out a little bit here, and I'm going to put this edge of my knife on that and do another section outwards. So it'll actually be, this is about a 12-inch knife, so it'll be about two feet that you're floating this out to to make it look nice. And you don't want to go like this way trying to do it. It's always, you know, this direction with this. So again, I'm gonna put one this way. I'm gonna put a layer kind of lifting off this edge over here so it's not real smooth. And then after that dries, I'm gonna do another layer that's gonna be tight on both ends. All right, so this is another really bad one down here. And so you can tell, like, this is a huge rock on that. So I know these walls are way off. But if I come over here just a little bit, the stud over here though is also off because it rocks. But you don't really notice this one because it's gradual. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna, you know, try to fill in this area with some mud. But looking at it, if I put, I don't know if I can show you this. Let's see if I can get the camera right. Okay, this is hard to see, but if I put my blade against there, you can see my fingers there. I mean, there's this gap right there in the middle. So if I fill in that gap, it really shouldn't be very noticeable. So that's my plan on this one, because it's tight over here, it hits that corner, and it hits this corner. So if I just fill in that middle part, it should look good. Oh, and something about these knives, I mean, if you look down the edge of them like that, there's actually a bow in this. And that's so when you're doing your mudding, the edges flare outwards on the edges so you don't get a hard line in your mud. And so if you have it the wrong direction, if you don't look at which way you have it, the edges curve inward, and then so you're going to get these big lines where your mud is wet, and it's going to create a line in the mud. So you got to look at this, at which direction you're supposed to be using so the edges flare up. So you can probably see this here. There's a line I was talking about, how the edges kind of, you know, cut into your mud. And that's not good because, you know, eventually you're going to have to sand that out. And if you mud over top this right now, you'll get little crusties, you know, coming off there and getting in your mud. And then you'll get these big lines in your mud. And then you'll be like, dang, you'll like pick out the little hard stuff in your mud. And then you'll have to redo it. So once you start getting little bits of stuff in your mud, it's kind of a pain in the butt. So what I always do before I'm gonna put a coat on is I take, you know, some blade, usually a smaller one, and I go over all these areas and kind of smooth them out with this, just so I don't get little pieces of mud in it. And another thing in these corners, if you do one corner side and let it dry and then do the other corner side, it's a little easier, but I'm never that patient. I just want to do both at once. But when you do both sides at once, you'll get like these little globs in the middle there, because, you know, once you go in this side, it'll make a glob, and then you'll go over this side. So you keep going back and forth, and you'll eventually still end up with little pieces of stuff in the middle, but it's real easy to fix those. So here's a corner. I don't know if you can see this, but these little pieces that get in the middle there, you can just take a knife and then you can just, you know, bust those little pieces out so it smooths out all these edges. But these edges are actually still a little wet from yesterday, and so boy, it takes a long time for mud to dry sometimes. So these corners are still wet, so I'm not going to put a coat on them today. I'm going to let them sit till tomorrow, because you always want your mud to be dry before you put another coat on it. So in this stage, the crusties are really bad to get in your mud. So right now, if I open up this bag of mud, there's all kinds of little pieces going to fall into the mud, little hard pieces, and it's going to be it'd be nasty. So what I do at this point, I just rip a little hole in the bottom of the bag, and then I can just, you know, work the mud out of here, and then you know, you can get the mud off there and the little crusties and throw it back in there. It works out a lot better than trying to scoop it in off the top. Alright, so today I got another coat on these corners. So the first coat is when I embedded it in the tape in the mud, and then I put, this is the next coat, the second coat on that, and that's it. And so these corners are done now, and when I'm doing these other coats, I don't thin down the mud at all with water. I just stir it to make sure all the bubbles are out and it's smooth. And then I try to, you know, really push hard and get most of the mud out, so really as thin as possible thing of mud. If you got little things like this, you know, little bumps, don't worry about it now, and I'll have to sand those out, you know, later on. But for now, this is good. And on these last coats, I really try to take my time and make them, you know, really flat as possible. All right, on these ones, these butt joints right here, these are pretty flat. They didn't have much wobble on them. So I know these are only going to take one more coat, so I embedded the tape in the mud with the first coat on it. Then I put another coat on it like this. Now it's good with mud. I don't really need to build anything up on this tape. And I'm really just trying to cover these edges and make it a little bigger now. So I usually take my knife and I put it on the edge of that tape and make it out wider. But you really just need to kind of cover up these edges now and make it a little smoother looking on that. Now on this one, remember I was building up the edge, so you can see on this edge right here, well you probably can, it'd be hard to see, but it now sticks out a little bit. And so now my next coat, I would still go over this on this side, make sure, you know, I go over this, but I'll also do one farther over now and kind of go along this edge right here. So my mud will actually go way out to here. And I did notice this is really helping out with the wobble in the wall. But up above right here, it's still got quite a big one. So I need to build up the mud here. And then once I get up to about here, then things get a little better up here. So, you know, it really, you know, just takes some looking at this to where you're going to need to build up the mud. But again, you always want it smooth on the edges. Right on, so there we go. It's all pretty much done, except for I need a few more, or at least one more, maybe two more coats on some spots, just that are really bad, but the other ones are good to go. So until I sand, they're pretty much done. So it gets faster as you go along. And you can see right like this one, this panel is quite a bit in compared to this one, and that's the tape. Middle of the tape is right that white line, so half the tape is there and half is on this side. So I'm just building up mud on this side to make that more even. Same with over here. So now I'm still kind of building this out. I'm gonna do at least one more coat on all this to kind of smooth it out a little bit. And that one might be all right, and this one's going to need a couple, like at least another coat, maybe in some spots. So today is the dreaded sanding day. I did put another real light coat on some of these yesterday, and I was really just trying to smooth stuff up and not really put a lot of mud on it. because I got to sand today, and the smoother it is when you put the mud on, the less sanding there is to do. So I mean, I was looking at it, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of sanding, but the main thing, you need one of these sanding blocks. I usually get a medium fine one. You don't need the coarse ones, are too coarse. But then I'll come along, and most of these joints here, you really just need to sand your edges right here, because that's really where you get this line, and you'd maybe see it later. You know, really on your inside here, you really don't sand much, and don't take your block like this and put it in the corner like that and then go up and down, because you'll sand in a little groove from the side. So you really always want to, you know, just lightly sand this way when you're in the corners. So right here, yeah, hopefully you can see this stuff, but there's these ripples in the mud. So I'd come along here and kind of just really lightly sand out those lines, so that's smooth looking. And most of these, I can see a little bit right here. I might just go along these edges and just do a real light sand. Here's another little line I see. And there we go. So I'll just go along everything and do that. Mostly just kind of making sure these edges are really smooth. So the same thing with these big butt joints right here. You don't need to be sanding everywhere in here unless there's, like, you know, some kind of little ripple. Like I see a little kind of ripple right there. So, you know, I'd sand out that. And most of the time you don't really even need to sand anywhere in the middle. And then you just, you know, smooth out these edges right here and make sure those are really smooth. You know, I'll come along here. I see another, you know, some little areas that have a little ripple or line in it, so I'll get out those. But you can just really do this pretty lightly. You don't need to sand a lot on this stuff, because it should be, you know, pretty flat anyways with all the mud. So it's really just hitting the edges a lot. And after I get done sanding, I'm going to clean up, and then I'm going to start probably texturing underneath the cabinets. Like normally you'd texture a whole wall, then you'd put up your cabinets, but once the cabinets are up, trying to get a spray around that with a regular texture gun is really hard. So I'll go around and use this can stuff. Now, I mean, this can stuff actually works pretty good. I just set it at a medium setting. Whenever I set it at a heavier setting, it seems to just put big splotches on the wall randomly. So I usually just set it at medium, and I go over it a couple times if it needs it. But these work pretty good, but they don't really last very long. So if I wanted to do this whole thing with these cans, I mean, I think it would take me a lot of cans. It says a medium that covers 75 square feet, which is 7 by 10 wall. But I really don't think it's even a quarter of that, but maybe a 5 by 5 wall or something. But I mean, then you need, a lot of these cans, and they're like, I think about $13 a piece. So, but they're great to use in small areas. So I'm going to use them, where I need to just do small areas underneath my cabinets. Now for the rest of it, I'm going to be using this regular professional air hopper gun. Now I was looking for these. They're like $85 now at Home Depot or Lowe's, and I looked on Craigslist. There was one for like $30 used, and then I looked on eBay and I found this one for like $26. And so I mean, it's $26 is pretty cheap. And if you look at the gun part itself, I mean, this is just standard. I've had several of the ones you buy at Home Depot. The only difference is this hopper is kind of small. This would be more like probably half the size of a regular hopper, and you don't really want to keep reloading this with mud as you start texturing. You just want to, like, bam, keep going. And So that's the only downfall, but 26 bucks, I mean, brand new, you can't beat that. So that's what I'm going to be using for most of this stuff. But, you know, again, this thing has such a wide pattern on it. You're actually standing about 6 feet back from the wall, and you're spraying this, but I mean, the pattern is like, you know, this big. So if you're trying to get in a small area, so as I'm spraying up on this top area, I'm going to spray this whole ceiling, so I'm going to have to mask off the ceiling so I don't get texture all over it. And so anywhere you don't want texture, within probably about 2 feet of this thing is going to need to be masked off. I'm going to have to mask off the whole doors, the windows, and then just blast away with this thing. But it isn't good for under countertops and stuff like that. Wow, so I guess I'm living in the past for prices. I need another can of this stuff, so I went down and at Walmart these are $20 now, and at Home Depot they're $22 for just one can of this stuff. And like I said, it doesn't really do very much, so wow, that's expensive. So now you're even a room this size, you're better off buying a Harbor Freight air compressor or something, and a texture gun and a box of mud. It would be cheaper than using these cans, which is crazy. So a space like this, I mean, if I use that big hopper gun, I mean, it's going to blast like this whole area. And so you'd have to mask off this with plastic. The bottom of this would have to be masked off, this whole cabinet. Because it would probably, you know, blast everywhere. Probably about 20% would get where you want it. So for this kind of area, I definitely would use the little canned ones. So I got all this stuff textured up with a can, but this is one that the can is empty now. So this was one can, and it did this section here and over to the fridge and kind of around the edge of the fridge, and that was it. And so, I mean, I'm spraying it a little heavy, but it makes it look like regular drywall. So that's why I was saying, with one of these cans you really don't get much coverage at all, but it makes things really easy to get in tight spaces. So I mean, if you wanted to do this whole thing with these cans, it would cost you a fortune, and it would really be cheaper to buy a compressor and a, you know, regular mud sprayer than these little bottles. But you know, in certain cases they work out great. But oh, I don't know if you can even see this texture, but it did turn out nice looking. And so now this will be ready to paint, and I'm gonna, you know, do this little edge here, just so when I do the main spraying, I can just block off this section like this with a thing of plastic, and it won't spray my new carpet over here. So that's my plan, man. Hey, it turned out nice looking on this side too. Yeah, I don't know if you can see a lot of detail, but it looks great. That is a lot of masking. I think it took about 2.5 hours for me to mask off all this stuff, but you know, now it's good to go. I'm gonna spray. You know, it'll only take about 10 minutes to spray, maybe 5. So it's kind of funny spending, you know, hours masking this off. But I did put a couple of thumbtacks in up here just to help hold this outer edge, because if this stuff falls from weight on it, I want it to fall this way instead of falling against my newly textured wall. So that's why I put a couple pins up there. Hopefully it won't need it and this stuff will stay up nicely. And I got my mud going here. So this is I'm gonna probably maybe thin this out just a tiny bit more, but I think this is about pretty good. And then I got my air compressor all ready to go, so I'm just gonna start plugging away. Oh, and to start out, I'm gonna spray like this door that's all masked off and make sure the pattern looks good. If not, I'll adjust the airflow to it. So the texture turned out really nice. I used the smallest hole little piece you can stick in the texture gun, and I had it set on 60 pounds. And boy, it looks really nice. You can't even tell this stuff isn't drywall. But here's what it looks like. Probably is easier for me to show you now while it's still wet, so you can see some kind of difference in the coloring. But yeah, this is going to turn out really nice when it gets painted. And here's where I used the spray can on this side, and then I just textured in here today. And boy, you can't even really tell. It looks pretty close match. And then the same up here. I just used a spray can for here. And then I just sprayed with texture gun right about to there. So yeah, this is going to look nice when it's all painted. And now I can finally get this painting done. Bam! Here we go. It really didn't take this long to do, but I finished up, and then I was like, man, this looks great. And then I got off to doing other things, and I was like, man, I gotta finish up this video. But it turned out like totally fantastic. So I mean, I would have no doubts of doing this in the future, because boy, it turned out nice. You just got to remember to use the I used the Kills non-water based paint primer, and then I used the taping mud. You got to get the taping mud for taping stuff, but it turned out great looking. So let me show you around. Here's the here's how things turned out in this room. I actually decided it looked so nice, the walls look so nice, that I needed to just make my floor go all the way in here. So now it looks so much nicer. Before, I was going to put a transition right there and leave the old linoleum, but this looks way nicer. And I mean, boy, you can't even tell on these seams. Even those really bad seams over here, like by this light, I had to remember, I had to go way out, and so you cannot even really see these things. So to me, it turned out fabulous. I'm hoping you can see the texture and stuff on this, but you know, right here where the seam was really bad, I could see it, you know, if you look at it at an angle. And this really big one right here, it's got a little bit you can see, but for the most part, these look great, and it looks better to me than it really looked new, because new had that cheesy wallpaper, and so this looks normal and not like that cheesy wallpaper. So anyways, I hope you liked the video, and good luck to you if you try this yourself. I'm sure you can do it. Oh, and here's looking down my kitchen, so you can see the whole thing. But even this upper part and in between the cabinets there, I mean, it turned out really nice on both sides. It looks so much cleaner. And then I put a little bead of caulk on this old backsplash, and it looks fabulous. So I couldn't ask it to turn out better.